I'm Joy.
And I'm Mariam.
I'm a TV presenter.
And I'm a scientist.
We are going to explore how genetics affects each and every one of us.
From medicine to dinosaurs.
From the food we eat to the way we are. So let's get into our first topic for
Generation Genome. This episode is all about genomic medicine.
So if you have a genetic condition and become ill, the first thing you do is go to a doctor so they can investigate what's going wrong and diagnose you.
Right. And a lot of the clues may lie in your DNA. A DNA sample can often help your doctor find out exactly what's going on and what disease you might have. They can even use that information to decide what medication you might respond best to.
But there's still a lot of diseases that still need a cure or treatment.
That's true. But the more we study our genes, the better we understand what's going on inside our bodies, which means we can come up with really precise treatments. 13-year-old Ava loves knitting, reading, and has a rare genetic condition called EPP, which is a type of light-sensitive porphyria. Porphyria is passed down genetically. It's caused by the buildup of chemicals called porphyrins in the body, affecting the skin and the nervous system. It means Ava needs to be really careful in sunlight.
I started becoming symptomatic at the age of 3. I got diagnosed with EPP when I was about 4 or 5. I get itchy hands, and it's not always in my hands. Sometimes, if I've had too much, then my hands, they'll swell up with all the protoporphyrins and they will go bright purple, which is fun. I do wish that sometimes people would know why I'm inside, or why I have to wear a hat and gloves all the time, or why I might have to miss out some lessons of PE.
Ava is the only person in her family to have inherited 2 copies of the porphyria gene, which has led to the disease being active. Sue and her sister Liz, on the other hand, both have porphyria. Together, they're trialling a pioneering gene silencing treatment.
I would literally go 7 or 8 days and then I'd have a big escalation of pain, and I just went through a cycle constantly. Had chronic pain the whole time. Now, since being on the treatment, my attacks stopped overnight. So literally from having the first dose, it changed. And from that point, I got to a stage where now I'm completely pain-free. Have not had an attack since, and I'm much stronger, healthier, and able to kind of live again. My sister was tested and they were going through matching for a liver and kidney combined transplant, which was a really scary process as a family, and to the treatment, she's been on it for 4 years and has been totally life-changing. She was completely paralysed. The future was very bleak. To look at her now, it's totally transformational, and she's got a 10-year-old little boy and isn't going to hopefully need a liver transplant. So this is the treatment. It's tiny. It's administered via a tiny little syringe and a needle which just goes into your tummy, and it's administered once a month. So the other treatment that I did have, which will have kept me alive but didn't actually stop me having the attacks, involved all of these supplies. On roughly every 7 to 10 days I would have a treatment.
It's just amazing, all these new treatments that's made your life so much better.
It is really exciting.
Yeah.
I was genetically tested, so I knew I had the condition. So as soon as I started with symptoms, I got treatment, so they knew what to do. And for me, prevention, knowing that you have the gene, is better than cure.
Sue's and Ava's types of porphyria are different to one another, and there are actually 8 different types of the condition. Ava's buildup of porphyrins are in her blood, whereas Sue's start from her liver. The genes involved even work differently too.
A lot more people have the gene than actually will ever go on to present with symptoms. So for me, my type is a dominant gene, but it means that you only need 1 copy from one of your parents to potentially develop the symptoms. Whereas for Ava, with EPP, you inherit a gene from both parents. We both have porphyria with very different symptoms, very different treatments. The gene silencing treatment that I'm on wouldn't work for Ava because it targets the liver. So, but there are lots of new treatments, which is exciting. And I'm really excited for what is going to happen for children and young people who are often the worst affected by EPP in particular.
I think it'd just be life-changing for everyone who has what you have and EPP, and you wouldn't be confined to being inside all the time. You'd always be able to live a normal life.
Wow, it's really something seeing how much looking at your genes can completely transform your life, not only giving you a diagnosis, but better treatment.
Exactly. Your genes are important to personalise your medicine.
Another thing we really need to talk about is vaccines.
Yes, genes are so important in making a vaccine, but also in determining how someone might react to receiving a vaccine.
So with COVID-19, for example, people reacted differently to the disease, but also to the vaccine. Why is that?
Well, for example, scientists have actually found a genetic variant in humans that can double your risk of breathing failure and death from COVID-19. The variant is carried by around 60% of people with South Asian ancestry and just under 15% of people with European ancestry.
We always have to weigh up the benefits with the risks when it comes to medicine.
Always.
In the NHS, I see children and families who people think might have a rare condition that genomics can help understand what's going on. And I work at Genomics England, which is a government-owned company that uses genomics to help people in the NHS.
How is genomics useful when it comes to making vaccines?
Vaccines are the things that the injections we get to try and prevent a particular condition. Now that we understand how to make vaccines in lots of different ways, it's been vital. In COVID, for example, suddenly this new type of vaccine has come on the scene. We knew about before, but no one knew if it would work like it has, these RNA vaccines. To read through the genome of the bug, the virus, to know what to target, what to make the vaccine look for in the body.
Unlike most living organisms, the genome of coronaviruses like COVID, flu, and the common cold consists of RNA, not DNA. There are two types of COVID vaccine. One contains part of the COVID spike protein. The other has the RNA instructions to build the spike protein. Vaccines like the Oxford AstraZeneca are considered the more traditional type. They have a vector, tiny little protein shells that deliver a harmless part of the COVID spike protein to the body. This can't cause the disease, but it does instruct our bodies to make antibodies to help protect us. Vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna don't have the spike protein itself, but they do have the RNA instructions to actually make the spike protein. Our bodies read the RNA from the vaccine and make the spike protein. Our immune cells then make antibodies against the spike proteins to protect us against future infection.
We're also looking at how people respond to vaccines and looking at their own genome, the person's genome, to help understand whether there are some people who respond really well, who when they have the vaccine, they just won't get the condition at all.
And what's one common myth around genomics that you'd like to debunk?
So I think the biggest myth is that genomics is something special and completely different from the rest of medicine, and it's the sort of thing that happens in sci-fi movies but doesn't happen in the day-to-day. Working out just like you do an X-ray or ask someone how old they are to help work out what the best treatment for them is. Looking at bits of their DNA code, looking at their genomics can also help with that, and it's really important that I think people don't feel it's something scary and different. It's our future, it's the future for all of us.
We'll just have to see what the future holds for the world of genomic medicine.
I think so, and having your genome sequence can tell us so much about our bodies, how they react to medicine, to infections, and which genetic diseases we might develop.
Sequencing is already helping us treat diseases like cancer, which is caused by mutations or mistakes in genes. We can actually sequence someone's genome to reveal exactly what genes are faulty.
That's right. We can then tailor their treatment, making it more appropriate for them.
One place doing a lot of research on this is the Wellcome Genome Campus in Cambridge. Our genome has a code that is 3 billion letters long. Every cell in our body has this code, and it gives our cells instructions on what to do, make, and look like. Dr. Sam Bajati is a researcher and a children's cancer doctor. He looks at this genetic code and uses it to learn more about different types of cancer and in some cases, diagnose and treat it.
So I thought I should bring this book along here to just give you a sense of what a code of 3 billion letters is. And it takes 100 of these books to write out the genetic code of 3 billion letters in very, very tiny font. Cancer arises when this genetic code acquires errors. So what happens is cells, as we grow, they divide and divide and divide. They become old and then you need a new one. And each time a cell divides, that genetic code needs to be copied. Now, you can imagine it's not totally straightforward to copy 3 billion letters each time completely accurately. So what happens every now and then, there's an error in this copying process, and that error we call a mutation, where one letter, for example, is changed into a different kind of letter. Most of the time, this doesn't matter, but every now and then what happens is that particular error, that particular mutation, changes a cell in a way that it transforms it from a normal cell into a cancer cell.
And why do cells copy and divide in the first place? Well, it's called mitosis. Cells divide into two when we grow and when we need to replace older cells or when they need to repair themselves.
When a child is diagnosed with a tumor and we have taken a sample of it, we can then send this sample off to get it sequenced. This one example would be a child who had a brain tumor, couldn't be cut out. Giving chemotherapy for it wouldn't work either. What chemotherapy does is it kills cells that divide very fast. It just happened to be one of those mutations for which there's a drug, and we were able to give the child that drug and the tumor begins to shrink.
We've come so far in the treatment of diseases like cancer, and it seems genetics is playing a really big part in helping.
Yes, but many people still have a lot of questions.
And we'll get round to those in the group chat.
See you after the break.
Welcome back to Generation Genome. It's time for the group chat.
That's right, and we went to Brompton Academy in Kent,
where I was joined on the panel by Liz, who campaigns for people with porphyria, Ava, who we met earlier in the episode, and the University of Kent's Gemma, who works to bring science to our communities. I started the panel by asking our final panel member, Dr. Patrick, what he does in the world of genetics.
So what I do is I'm interested in cancer and trying to improve treatments for patients with cancer. And the way that we're able to do that is to look at the genome within cancer cells themselves and try and identify mutations or mistakes that enable specific treatments to be available to patients who carry those changes.
And Ava, what's it been like for you? What's your journey kind of been with porphyria? I know you went to the beach this summer. Tell us why you were able to do that.
It's because of this new treatment that I'm able to have.
What does that look like?
Well, I have 2 tiny little tablets every day that I just have in the morning. And it's much easier than previous treatments that have come out where you have to have like an injection and have like a little pellet injected into your skin, so it's much easier.
I then asked Gemma why it's important to know about the genetic diseases that affect us and our loved ones.
So cancer is a really important condition to know about, for example, because it affects so many people. We probably all know someone who's affected by cancer or has been in the past, and half of us in the future will be affected ourselves. So I think it's important that we can understand the treatment that we might be offered and be able to make decisions about our own healthcare.
I then got our first audience question. They asked Ava and Liz about their genetic condition. Can you tell me your name and how old you are?
My name is Aiden and I am 13.
Amazing. And what's your question for the panel?
What can people do to cope with a rare disease like porphyria?
In the summer, I will be wearing like a wide-brimmed hat and normally fingerless gloves, so then I can protect my face and my hands from the sun. But if I do get a reaction, then I'll go inside straight away, and I have like ice packs that are flexible so you can wrap them around your hand, and they'll normally do the trick. But sometimes if it's a really bad reaction, it goes on into the night, then I have these like special ice packs, and they're quite big, and so I can do both hands at once.
For Ava, she probably undersells the extreme pain that she's in at that point, which will prevent her from sleeping, and so it's just a case of dealing with that in the immediacy. I have one of the acute porphyrias, which can cause attacks of things like pain, sickness and paralysis and seizures, so it can be quite life-threatening. And in my late teens and early 20s, I was really severely ill. So, but in more recent years, things like my ability to walk is much improved, and I'm not having regular hospital stays, which is amazing. Whether it's for porphyria or any condition really, it's about education. It's about helping them to understand more about what they can do to maybe prevent symptoms getting as bad.
I think some people are worried about how much we could change or engineer our genes for the wrong reasons, but that isn't the goal of most scientists, and we have very strict rules on what we are allowed to do in research.
That was also a question that one of our students asked, and Dr. Patrick said that knowledge can have consequences.
I'm Jaboy and I'm 13 years old.
Thank you, and what's your question for the panel?
Can genomics be used in a negative way? And if so, how?
Genomics kind of gives you the full answers. If you look at a whole genome, for example, you present the whole picture of the genome to a patient. Now, it may be that that identifies things that the patient wasn't expecting to see or didn't really want to see. And during that exploration, we might see a gene that is faulty or predisposes to a certain type of cancer. It gives them something that they need to deal with and consider the implications for themselves, but also for other members of their families.
With all the heartbreak and struggle that COVID-19 caused, it also brought about new ways to use genomics.
It did. We've already learned about the different vaccines that could help us, but those same techniques are now used to monitor the genomes of new strains of viruses and bacteria all over the world to stay ahead of any new pandemic.
Gemma started by talking about diagnosis. Then Ava and Liz talked about what it was like having a genetic condition that can make you more vulnerable to illnesses that affect your immune system.
I'm Silas and I'm 13.
And what's your question for our panel?
My question is, how are scientists using genomics to combat COVID?
From a diagnosis perspective, it's just amazing that we're able to track different strains of COVID and kind of change our response when COVID mutates and we get a new strain. I think there have been huge benefits in terms of the vaccine as well. So you might already be aware that conventional vaccines would have contained a weakened form of a pathogen or part of that pathogen, whereas the vaccine for COVID is based on RNA. So it's more about giving our own cells the instructions to make a particular part of the pathogen, to make a particular protein that would be found on that virus, and then our immune system will respond to that.
And for Liz and Ava, what's the past year been like for you guys?
Well, all the lockdowns that we had, I wasn't outside as much as I normally would, so my symptoms were a lot lower and I didn't have as many of them, which is nice.
Definitely. And for you, Liz?
So for me personally, I had to protect myself, although for most people with porphyria, they don't necessarily think they'll have any worse reaction than the general population. But I think an awful lot of people with rare conditions generally, especially those, as you were saying, that may have a weakened immune system, they will have been quite severely affected.
Our last audience question was about how genetics can be used to find a cure for cancer. How are scientists trying to do this?
Well, scientists are developing something called gene therapy. It includes different things like replacing missing or non-working genes or inserting genes that help chemotherapy and other treatments work better.
Dr. Patrick talked about how we can target mutations in certain genes in cancer cells.
My name is Tafimi Eden and I am 13 years old.
Lovely to meet you. What's your question for our panel?
How can genomics be used to find a cure for cancer?
For example, there are certain genes called oncogenes where their role is to tell a cell to grow and to divide. And what happens sometimes in cancer is that a mutation or a change within the DNA changes those genes so that they're kind of stuck in an on position. And when that happens, then these cancer cells, they can grow in an uncontrolled way. You can find certain drugs that can come and can break the switch so that can turn that gene off.
I think Dr. Richard Scott said genomics is the future. As a young person, Ava, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really hopeful because all these really rare genetic conditions that people just don't know enough about, that they won't try and treat them. It would just be amazing if they could all be treated and that people who are affected by it can lead a normal life, well, normal as they possibly can.
We then brought 4 of the students on stage to talk more about what they learned.
This group seemed really interested in science and how it affects our health.
I didn't know what genes like cause cancer, and I've learnt that throughout the thing today.
What about you? What was one thing that you learned?
I didn't think it was possible to be able to actually change someone's genes. I think that was really interesting.
What about you guys?
I found it very interesting how much research and detail had gone into researching different genes, so I found that fascinating.
I found pretty interesting that our genes have 3 billion letters to them.
And talking about genome sequencing, would you ever want to get your own genome read? Is that something that you might want to do now?
No.
No?
Maybe.
Maybe? How comes? Is it because you want to know, like...
Yeah, just to know what's actually going on inside me.
You said no, Alfie. How comes?
Because like, I don't really think like I need to know. So unless I need to know, I won't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's quite scary because, like, what if you do find out something and you don't want to spend your life living in fear? Yeah. Like, there's pros and cons to it, as we learnt today. And in terms of genomic medicine, what have you guys learned in school so far about it?
In class, we sort of learn on like how medicine can be made and how it can actually help people.
And in terms of genomes, do you do much about that in your lessons?
I don't think so yet, but we've looked into the COVID vaccine and the different types for different people, so that was quite interesting.
Do you like science?
I would say science is one of my favourite lessons, I would say.
What do you like so much about it?
It's just the fact that it delves so deep into like what happens in cells, plants and whatever. It just fascinates me.
Speaking of the COVID-19 vaccine, there was a lot of misinformation around it.
Like, some people thought that because it was developed so quickly, it wasn't safe. But actually, scientists had been working on the techniques for a while and were given lots of extra resources such as funding, people and equipment so that they could make the vaccine quicker.
But there were side effects. For example, I didn't get the AstraZeneca vaccine because they found out that it posed a particular risk to young women.
One of the students spoke about their experience with their vaccine.
I have had my vaccine, yeah. We had the vaccines come in to Brompton and a few students had it and some of them even had there was the flu jab as well.
We ended the chat by talking about how genetics could be the future of science and their careers.
I actually want to become a forensic scientist, so I'm looking into doing GCSE science, triple science and A-level science.
Nice. What about you guys?
Possibly. I like science and I think chemistry is quite interesting, so yeah.
And they said in the package that genomics is the future, and we spoke about that on the panel. How does that make you guys feel? We can start with you, Alfie.
It makes me feel kind of like more like happier that they're getting somewhere in the world of genomics.
I think if it helps people, then it's really good at getting better at saving people who are sick.
Well, genetics does give me hope that we will continue creating cures, diagnosing and preventing diseases.
There's still a lot to discover, but it's already becoming something we use in everyday medicine. I have a feeling it's going to become even more common.
Agreed. Well, that's all we have time for on this episode. See you next time on Generation Genome.